Join me for this start to finish fabulous furniture makeover. I started off by sanding the top with an 80 grit sandpaper. Once I had all of the manufacturer's stain and finish removed, I went back over it to smooth it out with 120 grit sandpaper. Prior to cleaning, I do go ahead and remove the hardware. Super simple. When you have a back plate like this, you do just want to kind of go back and forth and pry from the top and then the bottom so you don't bend that back plate. For cleaning, I typically go ahead and vacuum out the inside, and then I'm going to go ahead and clean it with White Lightning, which is a TSP pre-paint cleaner. I generally spray it on, scrub it down, wipe it off with a paper towel, and then spray it down with water to ensure I get all the residue off, and then wipe it back with a lint-free paper towel. Since I'm using chalk paint and this is cherry wood, I want to go ahead and prime it to block any bleed through from the tannins in the wood. I'm using Bonding Boss here. It's a fabulous all-in-one primer. It blocks bleed through, odors, and it adheres to slick surfaces. 2 thin coats is best here. You can see after this first coat, it is not completely opaque. Give it about 2 hours. You'll apply the second coat and then wait 24 hours prior to painting. My client wanted a nice smooth blend here. So again, just like the primer, we're going to do 2 very thin layers. I'm using Dixie Belle chalk paint in Antebellum for my darker color and Vintage Duck Egg for the lighter color. For a nice smooth blend, I would absolutely recommend that you use a very good, high quality synthetic brush. You want to make sure that those bristles are nice and flowy. Since chalk paint dries very quickly, another essential tool is going to be the mister bottle. You want to keep that paint nice and wet to keep it workable just a little bit longer. Since the Antebellum is my dominant color, I'm using a round small brush to apply that paint. And then for the Vintage Duck Egg, I'm using an oval small synthetic brush here to bring the colors together and create that nice, beautiful blend. I'm using a mini, which is a flat 2-inch brush, all synthetic. Of course, I forgot to show the paint initially on the first layer, so just wanted to give you guys a quick close-up of that. So you can clearly see how that Antebellum looks as well as the Vintage Duck Egg prior to the blend. These colors look quite a bit brighter on the finished product because the final sheen really makes the difference. The chalk paint dries to a very flat, matte finish. So when you add something like a clear coat in satin, which is what I used on this piece, it really deepens the color and brings out the richness. You can kind of see by the reflection here of the lighting how much water I am using. I cannot stress enough that you use very little paint here and keep it very thin. After the first coat, I decided I wanted it to be a little bit darker, so I'm actually using a round large brush on the second coat so I can get a little more of that Antebellum on here and very quickly. Otherwise, the process is the same as the first coat. Again, the key to achieving this smooth blended finish is going to be a good synthetic brush, the mister bottle, and thin coats of paint. Very, very little paint. Since these are very thin layers, there's no need to sand in between coats. Once the paint sat for 24 hours, I started to layer in the Dixie Seed Transfer. This transfer layers beautifully. It is completely opaque, so you cannot see the stems or the flowers that are underneath that very top layer. Additionally, the halo is very, very minimal. You can use most water-based protectants to protect over the transfer. The one exception to that is gator hide. For the top, I'm going to be using Golden Ash No Pain Gel Stain, and I'm just applying this with an applicator pad. One of the biggest things here is you just want to make sure that you're going with the grain of the wood, and I typically try to stand off to the side a little bit so I don't create that natural arc with my body. The No Pain Gel Stain is oil-based, so it does need about 3 to up to 7 days in high humidity to dry before applying the water-based protectant. On the bottom here, I started protecting immediately after I applied the transfer, and I just protected with 2 coats of a clear coat in satin. For the final look and to add a little bit more depth and dimension, I'm using Best Dang Wax in black. I'm applying the wax with a natural bristle art brush just into kind of the cracks and crevices where you would have some natural shading. And then I'm wiping it back with a lint-free cotton cloth. I did decide I wanted some nice soft shadowing, so I did come back in with the bell brush here and kind of bring some of that Best Dang Wax in black out to create a nice smooth transition here. I hope you enjoyed this video, and all products can be found on my website at www.newcreationsbystacy.com.